South Africa's child literacy standards have again been laid shamefully bare, and it's getting worse. 81% of grade 4 pupils in South Africa can't read for meaning. We are dead last against 57 countries. This was revealed by the Progress in International Reading Literacy study, PIRLS. It's an international assessment and research project. The study reveals that roughly 8 out of 10 children need help locating and retrieving explicitly stated information in simple and easy text. You'll recall in 2016, the study found that 78% of South Africa's children in grade 4 had a similar disadvantage. We're joined now by Dr. Stephen Taylor, Economist and Researcher at the Department of Basic Education, to understand why this is and what can change the outcome for our country's children. Good evening to you and welcome. It's another sad review of our education system, and it is a learning crisis. Why are things getting worse for South Africa's children?
Good evening to you and the listeners. This is a very sad review, and we take, as the department, we take these results very seriously. The reality is that before the pandemic, we already had a reading challenge, but we were at least on an improving trend. We were, in fact, one of the fastest improving countries in the world, but the pandemic has clearly put a halt to our improvement. A lot of time was lost. An enormous amount of teaching and schooling days were lost in 2020, and even in 2021, although schools had reopened, there was rotational timetabling, and even in 2021, about 50% of school days were lost. And for children in the early grades, and this assessment was at a grade 4 level, those children lost out on a lot of teaching time when you're learning the fundamentals of things like reading and also basic numeracy skills.
It's very concerning, and it sounds as well as if there's been a lagged effect from the COVID pandemic in our country. But here's the thing, we spend the equivalent of top-performing Scandinavian countries, I think around 19% of our budget on education, but our learning outcomes are nowhere near those countries. Aside from, some of the delays and the blockages to accessing education, what are some of the other contributing factors?
Yes, you mentioned a lagged effect. I would say this was more of a real-time effect because this assessment was done late in 2021, which is in a way at the worst point in time because this was pretty much at the end of the 2-year period in which schooling was disrupted. So there wasn't yet time to implement any catch-up programs or remediation. But the reasons, to your question, the reasons for this, aside from the specific impact of the pandemic, which is really why there was a decline, but the overall challenges around reading, which we've known about for some time, there are many different reasons, ranging from inadequate early learning opportunities before children even reach school. And there's an opportunity to improve here. Recently, many of the early childhood development functions have been transferred from departments of social development to the departments of basic education, to learning poverty, home support that needs to be better, also teaching practices that need to improve. So there are a lot of reasons why we do have this challenge.
Well, what's the weighting? I mean, we can understand some of the environmental issues. Kids might not have a supported home. Parents are probably working, or there isn't that, ability to go over homework and reading with them. But from what is within our control perspective, and that is when we have warm bodies in the classroom, how much weighting does that, contribute in terms of or towards this problem?
It's difficult to put like an exact weighting to it, but I think that the teachers and what happens in the classroom really is crucial. And I think the pandemic showed us what happens when you stop that. Just as child hunger went up when children stopped receiving meals through attending school, in the same way, when we took children out of classrooms where they interact with the teacher who has been trained to teach reading, we see a significant drop in learning. So it is a crucial part of why this happened, and it needs to be a crucial part of the solution. I think we, as the department, are taking seriously the need to provide better forms of teacher support, both for those teachers in the classrooms currently, but also at universities, to make sure that our initial teacher education programs at universities really focus enough on how to teach reading and how to teach reading in each of the African languages. I think we need to do more in that area as well.
So what your department is doing, notwithstanding, the environmental challenges, a pandemic and things like that, it doesn't seem to be working. You look to the Centre for Development and Enterprise, which labels ours one of the worst performing education systems in the world. You talked about learning poverty. UNICEF also refers to this as learning poverty, when children can't read and comprehend. They can't fit in. They develop low self-esteem. It's a common denominator in dropout rates, juvenile crime. The situation in South Africa is dire, and it would seem that we need a concomitant, sorry to use that word, response from the department to arrest, the failures and really put us back on the learning track.
I agree. I think it's important to note that we were improving. So I don't think it's quite fair to say that things that government has done has clearly failed, because we were actually a fast improving country over the past 10 to 15 years. That being said, we were still not yet nearly where we wanted to be. So a lot of work was still necessary. And now that work has received a setback. So I agree with you that the situation is very urgent right now. And as government, we will take it very seriously and put plans in place. We are already developing new plans. We're developing a revised national reading plan, which we think will make some of the necessary changes, focusing on grades 1 to 3 classrooms and on early childhood development, because I think we're realizing increasingly that the focus needs to be earlier and earlier in children's lives. Of course, we focused a lot on matric results, and it was quite pleasing to see that we managed to have good matric results even during the pandemic. But I think part of that concomitant response that you ask for needs to be focusing more attention on the early grades and even before school begins.
Parents and one would say learners as well are losing faith in a system that, historically has similar problems. Talk about plans being put in place. It's kind of like the politics speak of, taking it seriously, putting plans in place. But we are not making, again, the COVID moment, there's a distance between 2016 and 2020. We should have started to have seen real and material improvements. And when you're working off a low base, coming dead last, anything is improvement. So yes, of course, we are improving. But Dr. Taylor, we really need, there needs to be some radical action. Do you get the sense that the next time round, the next time the study is done, we would see a marked improvement and us moving up the ranks?
Again, I have to say that we were improving. And when you say we come last, it is true we came last in this study, which consists of mostly European, North American, and East Asian countries. There are only 3 African countries in this study. In other studies in Africa, we're more like middle or just above average in the Southern and East African region. So that noted, though, I think there is increased urgency with each time that the PIRLS study has come out. It first came out in 2006, then in 2011, then in 2016, and now the 2021 results have come out. I think each time this has come out, more and more we've realized that reading is a very important issue, and this time more than ever before. I know that the department is taking this more seriously. We've analyzed the president's State of the Nation addresses over many years. And prior to about 2019, reading never really got mentioned. But in 2019, it's become a recurring focus of what the president has made a priority. It's one of 5 very high-level goals of President Ramaphosa. And within the current education plans, it's also elevated to like the #1 priority in a sense for the current medium-term strategic framework, which is government's 5-year plan for basic education. So in many ways, I think the issue is already receiving much more attention than it has in the past. And I think more is still needed as we respond to these latest results.
Dr. Stephen Taylor, thank you for coming on to Full View. Appreciate your time.